Hi everyone, how's it going? Welcome back. I'm going to do a book review today. I'm going to talk about The Hunt for Red October by Tom Clancy. This book was published in 1984. I will be getting into some spoilers, so if you've not read the book and don't want it spoiled, just a warning here at the start. So this was the first of the Jack Ryan novels. Jack Ryan will become the hero of the Tom Clancy books, a CIA analyst who will rise in the ranks and eventually become president of the United States. But this is the very first time that we're introduced to the character. The Hunt for October is a Cold War thriller, but it's also a techno thriller in that it's really a book that is giving the reader a lot of information about military technology during the 1980s, and that became really one of Clancy's what he became known for was his um, immersing the reader in technology and how things work. So Michael Crichton became the other writer who was famous for the techno thriller. Take a new scientific theory or in concept and build up a story around it. But Clancy was doing this more in the realm of military and political thrillers. So just a little bit about the plot of Hunt for Red October. We have a Soviet captain, Captain Marco Ramius, who is in command of the Red October, a new high-tech submarine made by the Soviet Union that has the ability to evade sonar detection. Its propulsion system is very quiet, so American sonar, it will be very difficult for American sonar to pick it up. At least that's the idea. So this ship could easily, sneak in and attack the United States if need be. And Ramius, as we learned early in the book, plans to defect to the United States, and he has his own reasons for that. And also, his officers on the submarine are with him with this plot to take their submarine into American waters and join the American side. So that's the main intrigue of the book. And from the American side of it, we have Jack Ryan, who is a CIA analyst who is called in to give his advice on why this Soviet sub is heading towards the United States. The Americans know about its advanced propulsion system. And to add even more tension, they soon see that other Soviet submarines are chasing the Red October, heading towards the Atlantic coast. So this leads to a very tense situation, kind of a bit of a superpower confrontation in the mid 80s when the Cold War is very much on, and this novel is very much a Cold War book. So you have all this intrigue going on. We learn a lot about submarines in the book, about as far as the role of submarines in the Cold War and what their purpose was. There's always been a lot of secrecy around submarines. Their job is to be part of the nuclear defense posture, to do reconnaissance on the other side, to track what the other side is doing. So submarines played a very important role during the Cold War, and here Clancy lifts the veil a little bit, and we learn about the culture of submarines, how crews on subs, handle being below sea for many months at a time, and just how unique and possibly dangerous but also fascinating the work on submarines could be. We learn a lot about the Soviet naval culture on the Red October, and we learn a lot about American naval culture as well at the time. We're on the USS Dallas, which that submarine will play a big role in the story, as their sonar operator is actually able to track the Red October and see what's going on. Jack Ryan believes that Ramius is trying to defect, while the rest of the, defense apparatus is extremely concerned. They think maybe he's gone rogue and might be trying to start a war, and that, or this could be a provocation by the Soviet Union to trigger some kind of confrontation in the Atlantic. So it's a very tense situation, and that fuels a lot of the suspense in the book as the story unfolds. We learn a lot about life in among naval officers among the Soviet Union. We learn a lot about Ramius's history, where he's a highly respected captain. His reasons for defecting are mostly personal, but also something he's been harboring his whole life, like his own disdain for the system that he's had to tolerate for a long time. We learn about Ramius's father, who was part of the purges during the Stalin era, and he carries some shame about that. And we also learn about his wife, who died at the hands of a Soviet doctor who was incompetent and alcoholic. So he is really fed up with the Soviet system, and that's part of the reasons why he wants to defect. We learn a lot about how there was a lot of surveillance even among crews on Soviet subs, how there'd be political officers from the KGB who would monitor everything. So you get this sense of the paranoia that was there on the Soviet side of things. And as for the American side of naval culture, Clancy was very pro-military, and this is thinking about this book as like as a kind of a really coming out of that post-Vietnam era, where Clancy is really building up the reputation of the American Armed Forces here, where pretty much all the characters in the book are very competent, very good at their jobs. It's like that competency, like the art of competency, where just watching professionals who are very good at their jobs, and they always perform well and rise to the occasion. And that's really the depiction we get of the American Navy primarily here. So it's kind of old-fashioned in that way. It seems like the way we get a lot about how the officers relate to each other, how the chain of command works, and things like that. And later in the book, when there's a scene where the American officers and the Soviet officers are kind of comparing like their experiences, and it's a real point of pride for the American officers that we don't need conscription. Like, people volunteer. We get the best people who come to serve on submarines, and we just have a really better system here. So there's a lot of, jumping ahead a little bit here, but there's a lot of, especially towards the end of the book, comparing the American and Soviet systems, and we get a little bit of propaganda there, a little bit, but as far as that side of it, but like I said, this is really about showing readers what the American military does, and the competency and real professionalism of the officers, and what they can do, and the book does a good job of conveying that. We also learn about government agencies, primarily a little bit about the CIA, which would play a bigger role in later Tom Clancy books, and just how bureaucracy works, and Jack Ryan, who is an analyst for the CIA, and just how, and once again, it's the same thing, where Clancy is showing among government agencies, very professional, very serious people, take their jobs very seriously, and are also very good at what they do. So that's definitely comes through in the book. And I guess the Jack Ryan character is the symbol of all that, sort of all that's what the traits we respect in public servants, where he is a history professor and a former Marine who is now working for the CIA as an analyst, and using, and Ryan is the one who figures out what Ramius is up to, and everything. So the book does a good job of conveying that. And like I said, there is this whole um, the cult, not the cult of technology, but a book that's really in the mid 80s we're really getting this convergence of a society that is getting more and more high tech, and a lot of that, there's a militaristic side to all that, where it's looked as if innovation in military technology is looked upon as a sign of national strength, and there's always a national security aspect to technological advancement and all that. So that really comes across in the book too. Like, a lot of characters make it a point of pride. It's mentioned a few times how the military has access to technology that won't be available to the public for several years, and just this whole idea of being like a technical superpower, and what that means for national security, and I guess it's America's place on the world stage. So Clancy, yeah, it is a very Reagan era book of increased military spending. We have very competent people in the military, and this is such a sea change from coming out of the Vietnam era, where the military was under a lot of scrutiny, and its reputation as well suffered a lot during Vietnam. And the Reagan era was a lot about rebuilding, the reputation and the of the U.S. military. And Clancy does that. I mean, he's clearly someone who knew a lot of people in the military, and is giving readers a very modern look at how the military works. Like, it's often pointed out how the military is a place where people of all backgrounds can excel and find their potential. And that's another part of the book too, where the Soviet officers note that, there are they notice black officers working in the American military. So that old idea of the melting pot, and the military being a place where anybody, regardless of where they come from or who they are, if they have, they can find their niche and excel. So yeah, that's one of the other aspects of the book. Overall, looking back at the book, I mean, it's well paced. It does get very technical at times when we're talking about the maneuvers of submarines. Like, we really do get into some technical details about how submarines work, and a lot of detail and things like that. So there's that aspect of it, but it moves along fairly well, the book, and we do get a lot of suspense, a lot of surprises here and there, and like I said, it's pretty much well crafted. The movie, and I think the movie is a good example of how to adapt a novel, because there's a lot of subplots the movie did not get into that are here in the novel, and I think if you read the novel and then watch the film, I think you'll see how the film really did a good job of getting to the essence of the novel and what it was trying to do. So, like, there's a big subplot in the book about a spy the Americans have who is inside the Kremlin, who's known as the Cardinal, and there's a lot about that, and there's also a little bit about counterintelligence in the United States. So there's a lot of subplots in the novel that we don't get in the movie, which pared a lot of it down, which was well done. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Hunt for October. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.